Welcome to the Legendary Upside podcast. My name is Pat Corain. You can find all of my content at legendaryupside.com. With me today, Sam Sherman. We are going to be talking through the ADP risers and fallers, ADP chasing, you might even say. Sam, you know from ADP chasing and Establish a Run. Sam, how's it going?
I'm good, and it's a weird version of ADP chasing. Number one, it's on the leg up feed where it's temporarily being housed until the lawyers, set aside some differences. But number two, we don't have Davis, who was supposed to join. There were some scheduling snafus, but anyways, we're still here. A lot of fun stuff to talk through. I think we haven't really chatted since free agency kicked off at all, so we have the changes in ADP since the start of the legal tampering period. So it'll be fun to see how the market has shifted there.
Yes. There's plenty of ADP to dive into. Let's start with Justin Fields. So if people don't know, Sam and I have a side bet on Justin Fields starting week 1. I gave you, was it 5-1 odds?
5-1 odds. Yeah.
5-1 odds. So Sam gets, 5x, I believe, the $10 bet that we made. So
high stakes stuff.
A really high stakes bet here, but this run out has been really nice for both of us. You are now looking like the clear favorite to win the bet. I am looking like I'm going to pay $50 to make you root for Russell Wilson all summer.
Yeah, it's hard to say what's worse, the pain of having to watch Russ's highlight videos that he posts on Instagram and have to, back him as seriously. My guy. Yeah. The most cringeworthy speeches and workout videos the world has ever seen. So yeah, that's going to be no fun. But
and hey, listen, I definitely won't be sending you every single one in Discord. Here's your boy, Sam.
It's only fair as payback for me sending you every single tweet that was saying Justin Fields trade market, started as a 2nd-round pick, then was a 4th-round pick, then, teams like Drew Lock more than Justin Fields. So I was feeding you all that info during free agency. So yeah, you got to hit me with all the Russ highlight vids.
And I do think that Fields is actually kind of interesting to talk through from the ADP, because you can say, like, how far is too far? Does he become I had a high stakes guy message me saying, like, he's actually starting to think Fields might be starting to become a target, because he gives you that late season upside at quarterback. I personally think he needs to fall a little bit further. But yeah, I mean, there's sort of a weird difference with Fields, where, like, Fields is the type of guy that general managers are going to be scared of, clearly, but I don't think he's the kind of guy that coaches are going to be as scared of. And I think he does take that job. I don't think he takes it week 1. I think you're going to win that bet, but I think he takes it at some point in the season. He's got, the kind of the locker room. He's like a locker room plus type guy. And Wilson is a minus, I think. Yeah. So there's, I think he's got that. And I just think he's better at this point in his career than Russell Wilson. So I think he probably also, at this point, also probably a better fit for Arthur Smith's system, just given Russ's kind of more limited mobility at this stage. He's 35 now. So I think he takes that job at some point in the season. But do you think that either of these guys is at all draftable? And where do you think Fields would have to fall to if you don't want to draft him right now?
So he's at like 150-ish right now. Actually, Pat, would you mind putting the chart up? I can't actually do it. Yeah. So he's at 150 right now. I'm still not taking him. And it's not that I disagree with you, that I think in most scenarios, Fields takes the job at some point this season. I just don't think it's like a guarantee. Like, I think I'd put it, if I'm saying what are the odds Fields is starting games weeks 15 to 17, I'd put it at close to 50-50. And, that might seem a little low for some people, but I guess a couple things on Russ. I think number one, it's important to remember that Russ was terrible in 2021. Like, you can't defend his play in 2021 at all. In 2022, I'd actually argue his benching was less performance-based than it was contract-based.
Oh, that's a fact, I think.
Yeah, exactly. So my point being is that Russ wasn't playing like poor enough last year to deserve getting benched. And if he can sort of clear the Mason Rudolph bar, meaning like, Mason Rudolph was out there doing sort of league average quarterback stuff, helping the Steelers win games down the stretch, got them to the playoffs. If Russ can clear that, I don't think there's going to be enormous pressure for Justin Fields to take the field. So anyways, yeah, I'm just like, I hear people talking about, oh, he's going to take the job. He's going to take the job. It's not that I disagree with that, but I think there's this like this ADP of 150 is like confidence he's going to take the job. I don't have that level of confidence. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
I agree with you. I think it's too confident that he takes the job, and I think it undervalues the importance that you get quarterback starts early in the season because you're only taking 2 to 3 at this position. I imagine if you're taking Fields, it's in 3 quarterback builds, but like I looked at the win rates for some of the rookie quarterbacks a few years ago, and even like guys like Josh Allen, Justin Herbert didn't have like as high of win rates as I expected because they didn't get out there right away. And I don't think it's not great at this ADP. If you're getting it in the 19th, 20th rounds, where there's really, really low opportunity cost, that's different. But he's still going ahead of Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, it makes no sense.
Deshaun Watson's starting every game, So, I mean, obviously he could get hurt again, and you could say about anybody. So I don't really understand this current ADP. I know I've noticed that ADP seems to be moving a little bit more slowly, especially with the fallers, right? Because there's always someone that can come in and scoop a guy or auto draft a guy. So the fallers are going to be a little bit more slow to update, but still ahead of Watson, still ahead of Levis, still ahead of Geno, still ahead of Carr. I mean, these guys are all starting. Geno's maybe got an outside shot at getting benched if it all blows up. Carr's locked in, though. Bryce Young doesn't have much upside, but he's locked into starting all season.
JJ really McCarthy, I think, is pretty locked into starting in the playoffs, at least, right?
In the playoffs, I think going to McCarthy, if you said I'm taking Justin Fields over JJ McCarthy, that's where I'd go, okay,
sure, yeah,
that's fine. But he has another 40 spots, or maybe 30, 35 spots to fall before you have that conversation. Oddly, he's going way ahead of Russ at 197. I would take him ahead of Russ because the final season starts are so much more important than the early season starts. But it's a oddly big gap, I think. And Russ also should fall. I think both should be going lower.
Yeah, I think both should be. If you're telling me you can get Fields like last round, I guess that's fine. I think even then, honestly, he's not someone who would be a huge target for me there. I wouldn't like fault people for drafting him, but if he was going 18th round, I think I would have 5% of him or something like that, like in Pittsburgh stacks. I get it. It just seems like drafting backup quarterbacks in, one quarterback best ball. It's just kind of like, what do you win when you win? And the thing with Fields too, that I think is worth noting is that, like, okay, if you were saying that pretend there's this like theoretical asset that's like, Josh Allen's level of fantasy production, but he might not start games. Then I'd be like, okay, I'd be willing to pay a 150, 140, 130 ADP for like Josh Allen, but with benching risk. Like I'm willing to pay for that. I know when he's out there, he's giving me 25 points a game. He's a huge difference maker. Fields is like, has this perception of being this like locked in fantasy stud, but like we've seen it in stretches, but it's not really true. Like on a whole, that Fields has been this fantasy stud. Like you go back to his rookie year, which maybe is going back too far for some people, but he was god awful from a fantasy standpoint, like worse than Zach Wilson in fantasy points per game. 2022, we saw this amazing stretch from him in the second half of the season. Even then, in terms of seasonal averages, he was just quarterback 5, 20 points a game. So very good. And then last year he was at, quarterback 13, 18 points a game. He was behind Brock Purdy and Kirk Cousins. And you can talk about how like his ceiling game, certainly he does have a really high ceiling, but as a fantasy quarterback, even when he's out there on the field, he has a very low floor as a fantasy quarterback too. So that's where I'm like thinking like, maybe he gets out there week 12, the Steelers are 5-6 and he just completely craps the bed. Like we've seen Justin Fields do so many times in his career. Like how many games does he get doing that before they're like, I don't know, like let's go back to Russ. Like I just think it's like messier than people are making it out to be. It's not like instantly when he hits the field, he's just locked in fantasy stud. Like we've seen it in flashes, but it's not this guarantee that I think people have in the back of their heads.
Yeah, I'm not fully there because I just think his weekly ceiling is pretty nice, but there is this element of, you know, they kept trying to make him something he wasn't, and they kept, you know, not embracing the fact that he's a rushing quarterback. And then the Bears would kind of remember that he was a rushing quarterback, and all of a sudden, you know, he'd be out there and hitting spike weeks again. And so there's some concern about how, you know, Arthur Smith would actually utilize him. Would he have enough called run plays kind of thing? But they're certainly going to be running the ball a lot. And Justin Fields is also like not someone they have any franchise commitment to. So, you know, it would make a lot of sense for them to, if he ends up taking that job, for them to utilize him as a true dual threat. To your point, if they don't do that, he's not necessarily that exciting. But I mean, the guy had last year, he had spike weeks of, and this is half PPR underdog scoring, 31.9, 33, 24.7, 26.5, 25.2. The year before, I mean, he had 2 40-plus games, 40.7 and 41.4. Another handful of games in the 20s. Like, he does have a really high ceiling. I think for me, it's like, yeah, the ceiling's going to be inconsistent. He's not Josh Allen, where, you know, Sacrilegious did his Sortino ratio article for Legendary Upside, and that, you know, rewards both a high floor and a high ceiling. Josh Allen's out there just crushing every single week. Like, you plug him in, you almost don't even need a second quarterback kind of stuff. That's obviously not what Fields is. So I take that part of your point. One thing I would say is that if you're trying to build quarterback rooms that have upside, there are other ways to do that. You can get Jaden Daniels not too far ahead of, you know, Jaden Daniels is going 131. So it's like, if you just take 20 picks earlier, you just go grab Jaden Daniels. Drake May's going at 149. 5 picks earlier, you can get a guy who's very likely to start every single game and has kind of a Justin Herbert-y, like a more aggressive Justin Herbert kind of mindset is sort of what he is. Now, is he going to be as good as Herbert? No, but that's not the point. The point is that he's got a big arm. You know, he's fairly big. He runs around. He can score fantasy points. He's going to be out there right away. Regardless, even if he's on the Patriots, he doesn't have any weapons. He's starting all the games. So, and we don't have to worry about, do they want him out there starting this year? Yes, they do. They would have drafted him number 3 overall. They want him to start. So at this point, I just don't really see what Justin Fields is giving you that other quarterbacks in this exact same range can give you with a lot higher floor involved. But I do think if he were to fall into the 200s, if it's, you know, Daniel Jones versus Justin Fields, you know, Gardner Minshew versus Justin Fields, then yeah, I think at that point he starts to make sense. What about some of these other fallers?
Yeah, so the next one I wanted to talk about was the Minnesota pass catchers. So I think, you know, Hawkinson's down, but on this chart, we have Jefferson's down 40%. Jordan Addison's down 20%. And that's obviously reacting to, I think the market was baking in some chance of Kirk Cousins returning to Minnesota. That didn't happen. Now the Vikings are in QB purgatory. I guess let's start with your opinion on this, and starting with Jefferson. Do you think the fall has gone far enough? Like, would you put Amon-Ra, Puka, the, you know, Brees, Bijan running backs over him, or do you think this is about the right spot for Jefferson?
Yeah, well, I wanted to get your thoughts on this because Bijan has flipped Jefferson, and it looks like Brees is gonna flip Jefferson. Mm-hmm. And so I've been struggling because I have it Brees as the top ranked guy of those 3. No, sorry. Jefferson we still have ahead. We have Jefferson, Brees, Bijan. But it looks like the way the ADP is going to go is actually Bijan, Brees, Jefferson pretty soon. And at this point, I'm not really seeing a lot. I'm not getting a lot of Bijan because he's sort of, it's not even close now. He's at 5.4, Jefferson 6.1, Brees 6.5. So the steam on Bijan is really been pretty intense. I don't think he'll end up going for Jamar Chase. I think Chase is probably safe at 4, but it's going to probably be like a clear tier, Chase in his own tier and Bijan in his own tier at some point. And I'm kind of getting to the point where I think maybe just follow the market there to make sure I get enough Bijan, who I like. I like Brees more. I think I still like Jefferson more, but if I'm able to get Jefferson consistently at 7, that feels, I mean, to me, that feels pretty nice. Like, this is the best wide receiver in the league, and we're going to get him at 107. So that seems pretty great to me.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. And I thought about this a lot. Like, how would I order the top 7 guys? And I do think if I had to rank them out, I think I would go something like McCaffrey, then the next 3 wide receivers, Lamb, Tyreek, and Chase in some order. I don't particularly care about the order. Then I think I would go Bijan and Brees just slightly over Jefferson. But I think that I guess my, does that really matter? Like how I rank the top 6 guys? I think, or top 7 guys. I think all 7 of these guys are players I want exposure to. And at the top, I generally take a pretty conservative approach. Like, I don't think I'm going to full fade any of these guys. So I'm willing just to follow the market a bit. I do think Jefferson deserved to fall a little bit, but I guess I'll maybe outline a case as to why he shouldn't really fall much farther. If you look at last year, weeks 1 through 8 for the Vikings, that's when Cousins was healthy and playing. He got injured in week 8. They averaged 39 pass attempts per game. That would be close to leading the NFL. 70% completion percentage, very efficient. Then you look at weeks 9 to 18 when they had Dobbs, Mullins, Jaren Hall, these type of quarterbacks. They were still at 35 pass attempts per game, still at 65 completion percentage. So the offense took a hit, but 35 pass attempts per game, that's still like a top 10, top 15 number in the NFL. That's still pretty good volume. So that makes me feel good about the overall offensive infrastructure that Minnesota has. I think whether it's Sam Darnold, JJ McCarthy in there, I still think they're going to be a top 10 offense in terms of passing volume. I think that's just sort of a philosophical thing that's sticky regardless of who the quarterback is. Now, Cousins is, a much better quarterback in my opinion than Sam Darnold, than JJ McCarthy is going to be his rookie year. But I think there's enough like volume upside there for Jefferson, especially with Hawkinson, out for a huge chunk of the year.
Right.
That I when I think about him versus Puka versus Amon-Ra St. Brown, that's when I think you're starting to overthink it. I'm not going to do that. So yeah, I guess it's sort of a milquetoast take overall, but I'm probably going to follow the market on Jefferson, and I would scoop him up if he falls past like the Puka, Amon-Ra group of wide receivers.
Yeah, and I mean, I think just sitting even before that, like, it's pretty nice to be able to get him at 7. I know it's unlikely that they're able to get up there and grab like a Drake May, but like it's hard not to think about it. It would be pretty sweet if they can trade up far enough to get May. Most likely we're looking at Sam Darnold and a rookie quarterback. And so that should come with a discount. But it's tough. I think part of it for me is that I prefer Brees to Bijan. Mm-hmm. But I get the market's excitement around Kirk. But I mean, Brees is getting a massive quarterback upgrade. Is Brees getting I think I'm just going to put this as a statement. I think Brees is getting a bigger quarterback upgrade than Bijan Robinson, right? Because it's not really about Aaron Rodgers and Kirk. But to me, that's pretty close. It's about Zach Wilson and any other quarterback in this league. That's about, he is as bad as it gets. And that's what Brees was scoring, like not just playing with, but actually putting up big spike weeks with. So I get the enthusiasm around Bijan. Bijan's awesome. I want to take him. I don't know. I guess I just am struggling a little bit with the Bijan over Brees Hall part of it. But at this point, I think it's probably time for me to flip Bijan ahead because the market is taking a pretty firm stance, and I don't want to be fading Bijan.
Yeah, That's tough. Like I think I agree with you that I would take Brees ahead of him, but I don't feel strongly enough about it that I'd want to have some massive exposure difference between Brees and Bijan. I mean, Brees proved that he can still be like a fantasy league winner with Zach Wilson, which is incredible. And I don't think, Bijan, it was more about obviously the split with Algier and CPAT that kind of dragged him down. I don't think I saw anything his rookie year that made me think he can't do it if he had the full workload. But yeah, just the fact that Brees kind of already proved the legendary upside in a sense for me, and Bijan hasn't quite. I think I would, if I had won $1,000 team and I had to pick between the two, I think I would pick Brees as well. But
me too. But
yeah.
we're building portfolios, and yeah, it makes sense to make sure you get Bijan. So
yeah. What about Addison? I was not excited about him really when he was in like the 50s. Now it's getting to a point when he gets close to, JSN, Chris Godwin, those guys where, it feels fine to me. I guess like it's getting to a point where I thought he was overvalued and now he seems fine, but I don't know. How have your rankings moved on that?
No, I agree. I mean, it's interesting. Like Addison's a guy was not taking a lot of early on, fading in the rankings, and still behind ADP. He comes out at 72 in the leg up rankings, and yeah, I think he's probably still a little overvalued. And I thought he was especially overvalued early on because he was a guy, like when you think about like who's at risk, who's at most risk of the team level situation, it's the wide receiver 2 who's good, not great. We're still kind of interested in Devontae Adams, despite the fact they have Gardner Minshew and things didn't go as well as it could have, right? They could have gotten Cousins. They get Minshew instead. So, that obviously hurts, but we're way more worried about Jacoby Myers than Devontae Adams. And I think that makes sense. I think that's correct. Like, the Jordan Addison has kind of more to gain, more to lose from the team level stuff. Justin Jefferson creates his own value because he's that good. So I was having trouble drafting Addison really at all before, but he's falling, and I'm taking him some now. And I'm he's one of these guys where I'm like, oh, Jordan Addison, I haven't seen you in a while. You're actually falling enough to where I need a receiver, and here you are. So I think kind of late 6th round makes a lot of sense for Jordan Addison. And I think he probably continues to fall a little bit more.
I think he will too. I think like some of the big rankings platforms out there are still a little bit behind market on him. I think at ETR they're 5 spots behind the market on him. So the only last point on Addison is I think like he's been a guy whose his peripherals have been a little bit nitpicked by the fantasy community. Like his yards per route run are good, but not great. His targets per route run are middling, right? I think sometimes we nitpick that stuff a little bit too much for rookies. Like if you look at JJ Zacharyason's year 2 wide receiver model, that's still extremely high on Addison. Kind of has him in the same tier as Rashee Rice, Zay Flowers, just purely from, the mathematical modeling perspective. So I think we still should give a decent bit of credit for all the touchdowns, yardage, just all the accumulation Addison did his rookie year. It maybe wasn't like the sexiest in terms of, you look at his per route numbers and you can dream about some massive upside. But I think, at some point, like you can nitpick that stuff too much. So in the 70s, I think he's a decent pick. Again, going back to just, I think the pass volume in Minnesota will be good enough to support these guys, even though obviously some of the upside is gone without Kirk.
Yeah, and he did come in as he was sort of like a guy you're trying to hit a double with instead of a home run. He's a smaller guy, 175, kind of profiled as like a number 2 at the NFL level, is paired with Justin Jefferson. So now he's definitely going to be a number 2. And so, I think I get what you're saying about nitpicking his profile, but like this is a continuation of the prior. Like we thought he was probably going to be like a solid number 2, get out there right away, contribute, not be a superstar. And so far that seems to be kind of going as planned or as predicted. So, you know, when the offense overall takes a hit, his ADP should take a hit. He's almost a reflection of his offense. You know, I think a lot more than a true star would be. But I like it. I mean, I do agree. I think Addison's pretty good. Anyone else in terms of the fall? DJ Moore has been someone I'll raise. Like, I've been wondering if he would fall more. I thought he would. Again, falling takes slower than rising, but I don't know. It feels a little expensive to me.
Yeah, I think so too. Man, I really struggle with this like tier of wide receivers. I think for me, it like Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Nico Collins. That's kind of like the end of a tier for me. And then you just have this huge group of guys: Ayuk, Debo, Olave, Diggs, Adams, Rashee Rice, Marvin Harrison, DJ Moore, etc. I have a really hard time like sorting out how to rank those guys in there. I think with Moore, ultimately where I stand is that I think he still has the upside to belong in this tier. Now, I think he's kind of currently priced at the, you know, closer to the front of that big tier. And I think he should maybe be towards the back of it, but he was extremely impressive last year. Like, when you look at Justin Fields, the crazy thing, I get zooming out, like stepping back on Moore for a second. I was wrong on fading him last year, at least from like results based standpoint. Like, I faded him. I was like, you know, Justin Fields is a terrible passer. He's going to take a ton of sacks. He's going to scramble a bunch. Like, there's no way a wide receiver can, you know, pay off the 4th round price with, you know, that being true of Fields. And it turned out like Fields was terrible as a passer. He did take a bunch of sacks. And it just turned out he was only good when targeting DJ Moore. Like, his stats are crazy. Like, his passer rating when targeting DJ Moore, he was just insanely efficient when targeting him and basically terrible when targeting anybody else in the offense. So I don't know. I just think like when these wide receivers get a new quarterback, there's just this like really hard to price in volatility. And it goes both ways. Like, Caleb Williams could be better than we think. He could be worse than we think. And it's just so hard to predict. I just think with what he showed last year, you know, getting close to a 30% target share, 2.3 yards per route run in a terrible passing offense, maybe terrible is harsh, but, you know, bad passing offense. I just think that's enough of a ceiling for me that even with Keenan around, likely being a target hog, I still think he belongs in that tier, and I probably will still draft him. I do expect that he's going to fall 4, 5, 6 more spots, though.
I agree with you that he's in that tier. It's a big tier, though. And yeah it's kind of like, although I would maybe have him more in kind of like the Tank Dell Nabers kind of group. That's the tier I think he's in, which is sort of it's the tier that sort of gets split by ADP, where like if you told me you had Tank Dell ranked, you know, ahead of Chris Olave or something, like, okay, that's fine. But the ADP doesn't go that way. And that's where I think, to me, I think Moore should be that guy who's sitting there for you in the middle of the 3rd round with regularity, as opposed to, you know, going in the late 2nd. I guess it doesn't matter too much, but I just have a hard time taking him over all those guys. Like, you know, in pretty much every draft, I'm like, yeah, I'd rather have this guy and see if I could get more. That would be how I would end up drafting Moore. I'm like, I'm going to grab this guy who I like a little more, and Moore's there too in the 3rd round. That's great. But it's tough because Keenan was good last year too.
Yeah, really good.
And he's a target earner, and Moore can be a target earner, but he can play a number of roles in the offense, and kind of to be determined what his role in the offense looks like with the Keenan Allen, we know what Keenan Allen's going to be. He's going to be intermediate, shallow to intermediate targets, you know, more of the middle of the field, running out of the slot some. DJ Moore, I mean, he's so explosive after the catch. He can get deep. But we've also seen him pigeonholed a little bit over time, like, you know, early in his career, kind of more just as a pure deep threat. He can be used on more kind of gadgety stuff too. He can kind of do everything. He's a really good receiver. But have we ever seen him kind of paired with a receiver as good as Keenan Allen, you know, as we expect him to be? Like, he's always been
Curtis Samuel maybe is the best wide receiver he's had, right? Robbie Anderson, Curtis Samuel. Yeah, no one close to Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
No. I was trying to think of just who he's been with. Yeah, nobody that good. And yeah, the other thing, like with Keenan, I think it's almost like underrated how good he was last year. I wrote some cut candidates article earlier this offseason and found he was on pace for 141 catches for 1,600 yards last year. Like truly insane volume hogging. Like the same, I don't know, that would be the best season Keenan Allen has ever had. So at least from a statistical standpoint, hasn't fallen off at all. But yeah, so yeah, I think I agree with you. Like I'm just looking at ADP right now. I would take Ayuk, London. These are all guys who are going after him. I think I would take London, Ayuk, Diggs, Rice, Debo, Olave over him. And then I would slot him like right in that Mike Evans, Tank Dell range.
Yeah, I agree.
So yeah, it's just tough because yeah, I just think when you're weighing everything, the rookie quarterback, the Keenan Allen edition, he has to fall a little bit more for me to want to take him with regularity.
Yeah, I mean, Keenan. It's kind of crazy to me that Keenan was traded. You know, he was really good last year. Had the connection with Herbert. But yeah, I mean, I think if I was going to make an argument for DJ Moore, it would be Shane Waldron's coming in. This dude knows how to scheme up an offense for 2 wide receivers and 2 wide receivers only. Like he's going to have this. He's going to have every single, play design is going to be first read, one of Keenan Allen or DJ Moore, second read, the other guy. Like
who's the JSN of this offense in this scenario?
I think Cole Kmet is our JSN.
Okay.
Yeah. It's not. Yeah, not going to be too worried about the number 3 target here. So I think. I think probably we do. And I think that's true. I think we probably see pretty condensed volume. So I don't want to be out on Moore. I'm hoping he falls a little bit more. This is a situation where like I was taking him enough early on as the sole guy in Chicago when they were going to have Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
And it's always very, very clear that they were going to take Caleb Williams and trade Fields. But, they is a number 1. Like, okay, let's go. I was happy to take him in the middle of the second. I want that discount now, but I'm hopeful that we get it.
Yeah.
Anyone else on this fallers list?
I think we quickly touch on these Bears running backs like Roshan Johnson and Khalil Herbert. Like, I don't know. I guess I don't see the vision with like Roshan at this price. Yeah, we maybe don't need a long conversation on that, but that's got to just be like delayed. Market hasn't caught up to the news, right?
They were always kind of interested in Roshan, and I like Herbert better than Roshan.
Yeah, Herbert's like the way I'm looking at it is they signed, they paid Swift, what was it, like 24 million guaranteed, something like that.
It's crazy.
If you pay Swift that, you have to believe that he's a good pass catcher. Like you can't look at what Swift's done and be like, this guy is someone we want to, hand off the ball to you 20 times. Like you paid him to be a pass catcher. That steals from what the only thing, Roshan seemed to be good at last year, which was being on the field for pass protection, accumulating, like he had a decent target share. He did accumulate some receptions, didn't really do a whole lot with it. But yeah, I just see it as like this backfield makes a lot of sense as like a 1-2 punch between Herbert and Swift. And I feel like Roshan should be like not drafted like 20th round. So yeah, I don't know.
I agree. I mean, I think so. Swift actually got 15 million guaranteed, $24 million total. So that's
got it.
I was just that's it's still shockingly high, but yeah. But I agree. I mean, Swift, what can Swift not do? Where are you least likely to want to lean on Swift? If I needed 3.5 yards, I'm pretty terrified to hand the ball to DeAndre Swift, So who's the most likely guy to be able to turn that out for you? It's Khalil Herbert. I mean, he's at a really strong success rate. He's kind of more of a, dirty work sort of early down runner. So he makes more sense to me to pair with DeAndre Swift. And to be honest, I think he's probably better than DeAndre Swift as a pure kind of in and out, runner. Swift very explosive, but he wasn't even that explosive last year in an offense that should have shown that off. So I'm also starting to wonder, as he's entering year 5 if some of that explosiveness is.
I mean, it's really concerning when you were worse than Miles Sanders was at your job. That's a bit concerning given what we saw with Miles Sanders last year. So I don't get the move at all from like a real football perspective. I do just think like it's enough money that Swift's going to have to be really bad to lose the pass catching role there. And then, like there's just plenty of running backs. Like if you want to take a running back in the 160s range, you can find guys that are pretty clear RB2s. Like Rico Daddle's there. He might even have an outside chance of being an RB1.
Might be an RB1.
Yeah. You got Antonio Gibson there. I don't think he's any good, but he's very likely the RB2 in New England. Like you can get kind of secure, like this guy's going to be the next man up bets. With Roschon, like you're kind of just...
Yeah, I mean that's very. Tyler Algier's at 163. Roshan's at 168. I mean, come on.
Yeah. What are we doing? But I've been a Roschon hater ever since they signed Travis Homer. So I might not have the most credibility on the topic, but I think in the long run that take was directionally accurate.
Directionally accurate. What, the Homer part of it, I don't know if it was ever directionally accurate.
It doesn't matter how you get to the right answer, Pat, as long as you get there.
That's what the whole industry is based on the fact that it does matter how we get the right answer.
I don't know.
Results over process. You heard it here first.
Results over process. So I'm watching to see where Travis Homer signs this offseason. Very closely. I don't have any other huge takes on the falls here if you want to get to the risers, Pat.
Yeah. Do you need me to go through the slides or you got okay?
Oh, I can do it. Okay. But let's start with Jacobs. Curious your take on him. Obviously, I guess before we get into Jacobs specifically, I think I had the same take that you did pre-free agency where I was like kind of skeptical of these free agent running backs. Not so much Jacobs, but like the whole lot of them together. I think maybe I was I don't know.
The NFL made us look silly on that.
Yeah, were we dead wrong there, or
we were? I think we were wrong in that. I think we were wrong, and we ran bad. But I think we were wrong and ran bad. So we were wrong because this rookie running back class isn't good, and maybe the NFL just loves these guys and has nothing to do with the rookie running back class. But it didn't help. They're like it's not deep. There's not a ton of guys at the top. Like this is just a truly weak rookie running back class. Not to say some of these guys won't have success. I think there's some interesting profiles. But if you needed like a starting running back, or like the Packers did, just decided the starting running back who was really good last year was someone you want to move on from randomly, then that wasn't going to be, you weren't going to be like excited about that in the draft. And then it's also a really deep wide receiver class and not a great wide receiver free agent class. So it just, I guess we could have done a better job of predicting like, okay, like on the whole, some of these guys are going to be big winners. Some of them will be losers and some will be big winners. And as it turned out, then I think we ran bad because like, the probably the loser was Aaron Jones. The loser was a guy who had a job.
That was the only guy I was taking.
I know.
And then he gets unexpectedly cut. So
and then they don't get Cousins. And so even if he had landed with the Vikings and they kept Cousins, he wouldn't have even been a loser. But so I think it kind of went against us in that kind of way where like the Jacobs landing spot didn't even exist. And the Packers create the very best landing spot and then commit to Jacobs, with, a fairly big deal for a running back. So he's going to get every crack at it. Then they bring in AJ Dillon, which is great for him because AJ Dillon's not very good. And it lessens the likelihood that they'll draft somebody, or even if they do draft somebody, they could be a kind of a practice squad guy for a lot of the year. I said on a pod, that Dalvin Cook signing in a way kind of protected Brees more than if they hadn't brought him in a sense, because Izzy Abanikanda looks kind of good. He's actually got some juice, and so that kind of thing of like, now Brees is, I think a lot better, but it's helpful to have an RB2 behind you who is going to do everything he's supposed to do. He's familiar with the system and is not going to challenge you whatsoever. So all of a sudden, Josh Jacobs is in the perfect spot. I think he's finally moved up ahead of where we have him ranked, but barely. We've got him at 37. His ADP's at 36.4 now. So I've been interested in taking him. I've been trying to take him. Generally, with a guy like this, I've never really been excited to draft Josh Jacobs at any point in his entire career. If I think that he's a pretty solid value, then he's probably a target. And I keep thinking, when do I want to not? What am I going to feel like about Josh Jacobs when he's going 23rd? How am I going to react to that? Like full fade, not doing this? Then make sure you grab someone you can get him in the late third. That's kind of the way I've been trying to handle. You can even get him in the fourth still. I've gotten him in the fourth recently. So I think he is a target right now, partly because this is the cheapest he'll be all year.
Yeah, I think I agree overall on the target side. I looked at, so I think the big thing with Jacobs is like looking at what happened from 2022 to 2023. Like 2022, he was this league winner basically where you got him. 2023 kind of fell off a cliff. And when you look into it, what really happened is his rush efficiency is what cratered. His volume actually held steady. You look at his weighted opportunities per game, that's carries plus 2 times targets. That actually held pretty steady. You look at his snap share, that held steady. His route share, that held steady. So the Raiders still trusted him in this same massive workhorse role that he had in 2022 when he absolutely smashed. It's just that either the offense was so bad with Jimmy G and Aiden O'Connell that there were no lanes for Jacobs to, run through, or Jacobs got way worse as a player. And I don't know. I think the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. I think I'm willing to attribute to it mostly to just a terrible offensive environment. I don't think Jacobs all of a sudden got much worse at running back, though. It's not impossible.
Well, but keep in mind, when you say getting much worse, you're using the baseline as a career year where he was not very good before 2022. So if you zoom out, 2023 doesn't look like this blip. It's 2022 that looks like the blip. And that's, I think, where when we start talking about second round Josh Jacobs and why I am going to be fading him at that price, that is why. It's that he had a career year 2 years ago, fell off completely, maintained some efficiency as a receiver, the lone bright spot.
Yeah.
But if I'm going to be paying for this dude in the second round where I'm looking for him to absolutely smash because he's so talented, right? The legendary upside concept of like this dude is going to put a fantasy season on his shoulders and, the season is going to be about this guy. I just don't see that as a realistic possibility with Josh Jacobs. I mean, he wasn't even really that level even in 2022. So he's going to bounce back and be better than he was in 2022. It's not impossible. It's a big offensive upgrade, but I'm not going to bet on it. I'm not. So that's good. That's a previews of August takes on Josh Jacobs. But I look in the third round. I don't need that. In the third round, I'm paying for touches a little bit more. I'm more willing to do that in a good offense. He's got to bounce back to being not bad. I think that's more realistic. So it's just, and I know I'm not going to pay the second round price. So I'm like, even if I think I'd rather pay the fourth round price, I'm not going to quibble so much with it because I know what my August position is going to look like.
Yeah. That's fair. Like he never was some amazingly efficient running back before 2022. I do think that like 2023 was sort of like a career worst year for him in a lot of these metrics, but not like the truth is somewhere in the middle for who he was as a player before then. I think it's also worth considering though, like, I guess just to play devil's advocate a little bit, he has not been in amazing offensive environments throughout his career. Even this 2022 season where he was awesome in fantasy, this was with a Derek Carr team that Carr got benched to end the season because he was so bad. Like, I think people look back fondly on that 2022 season. It wasn't very good for the Raiders as a whole. It's just that 2023 was even worse. So I do see scenarios where he can be better than 2022 too, just because, AJ Dillon stinks. They paid him all this
He
money.
should definitely be better. How much better is the question?
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm playing devil's advocate. Ultimately, I agree with you. I think anywhere in the third round, I'm not going to massively quibble with Josh Jacobs. I think I'm fine taking him. Once he gets to the 2-3 turn, I probably start to have hesitations. But yeah, just this Packers offense. I think this Packers offense is going to be awesome. And this is maybe another discussion, but it's going to be really hard to figure out which wide receivers to play it through. I think there's worlds where if you believe in the Packers, you just take Jacobs. He just compiles a ton of touches and gets all the goal line work, and you're pretty pumped about getting him somewhere in the third round. I guess I also struggle to see what's the downs. Is he going to lose his job to AJ Dillon?
No,
yeah, it's just in the third round, I don't think there's a ton of downside. But yeah.
No, I agree. I mean, they have signaled as clearly as you can that this is about Josh Jacobs. They want to feed Josh Jacobs. They get rid of Aaron Jones. They give him this contract. They bring in AJ Dillon. I mean, I guess the final thing is then they don't draft anyone. But
yeah,
his ADP will probably rise when they don't draft anyone, and it seems pretty obvious. It would be kind of nuts if they did draft someone. So, I mean, I guess we shouldn't put it past them. They drafted AJ Dillon when they had prime Aaron Jones, so it's certainly possible. But I mean, I think
it's in play. They draft a running back, so it'd be weird,
possible.
But it's not impossible. Yeah.
I think the thing you're worried about is he scores 13 half-point PPR points per game, which is what he had 12.7 last year. He had 13.5 in 2021. He was at 14.1 and 14.6 to start his career. First time he ever hit over 15 half-point PPR points per game was in 2022. So that's, I think, the downside. Not that he gets benched, but that he just kind of he rushes for 900 yards and 15 games, and you're kind of like, all right, that's cool, I guess.
By the way, yeah, that's just what happened with every running back in the third round last year, where you're just I guess they outscored Jalen Waddle, but I guess it doesn't matter at all.
It didn't do anything for me.
Yeah. Also, did you see this thing where Matt LaFleur was caught off guard by them signing Jacobs? That is the one weird thing with.
Don't love that. Yeah, that does seem kind of bad.
Yeah, and
when I said they've done everything they can, that maybe letting your coach know what your plans are would be one more thing you could have done. Yeah,
I think this is a weird Packers thing where I think they've always had this GM coach disconnect. I think it goes back to even the Jordan Love pick, where the head coach was not on board with that either. So yeah, that's where I read that and I was like, it's not really LaFleur's plan. What if they just put Jacobs in the same role that Aaron Jones had and they use AJ Dillon the same amount? I don't think that's the most likely outcome, but that's not impossible.
That'd be rough. Because here's the thing with Josh Jacobs. He is, and this is going to sound like a dig. I don't really mean it as a dig, but he is, maybe it is a dig. He's fancy Devin Singletary. He's an accumulator. He's an accumulator. He comes out. Now, he's not maybe fancy. Fancy is the dig. He is a better version of Devin Singletary. He takes all the snaps, he puts them together in one man, and he scores fantasy points. But he doesn't as an Aaron Jones. No thanks. That's not.
Yeah.
He's not that explosive. He's a consistent guy. He's versatile. You can use him as a receiver, but Jones rips off big plays in a way that Jacobs doesn't really do. Jacobs is he's a chunk play runner. And he's a very capable receiver. And if you want him to play every single snap, he's happy to do it. So if that's not their plan, that's going to hurt.
Yeah. I think the comp for me is more closer to fancy Joe Mixon than fancy Devin Singletary, to give him maybe a little bit more credit. In that, I think Mixon and Jacobs are a higher tier of receiving backs than Singletary.
I think Mixon's slight, because Mixon's always come off on third downs, but I see what you're saying. I mean, that's certainly
just in terms of racking up receptions.
Yeah.
Mixon's been weird where he's been taken off the field in third downs, but still finishes the season with 60 catches for some reason. But yeah. And anyways, let's maybe move on to Drake London. I think this is a super, super interesting one. I listened to your ship chasing show where you guys were doing that confusing draft of the most fantasy impactful move. I wasn't sure what was going on.
Don't ask me to explain it again than what we were doing, but it was extremely intuitive.
Yeah, extremely intuitive. Either way, I think Kirk Cousins to Atlanta was ranked number 1, which was, I think, the correct choice. I think just massive impacts to every player in Atlanta, which we're
big tier break after that one.
Yeah, big tier break. Yeah, I don't need to talk about Gretsch's Deontay Johnson pick, but
a little bit of a reach there.
Yeah, oof, yikes.
That was one of the most fun ship chasings we've done in a while. That Gretsch, I think we all had a different understanding of the rules of the game we were playing, and then making fun of each other for the quality of the picks. Just perfect ship chasing. But I think the huge impact to have Cousins go into Atlanta, and I guess I've been like, dude, are we serious? Like, you guys liked Drake London this much that you wanted to take him at 18 the whole time? Like, what? Why didn't anyone tell me this? Because I thought that there was a good chance that Cousins was going to go there, and I guess I just have regrets that I didn't hammer London when before that happened, because it didn't occur to me that the rise would be so dramatic. But that is a leak from me. Like I bet I messed up too. I think the market messed up. They should have been more aggressive pricing in the Cousins stuff, but I messed up too. And I now have him at 17. I think it's so flat. Why not? Why not be grabbing Drake London, bet on this offense? Where are you on that?
I think like I'm even willing to go slightly higher. ETR has him at 13, so I think
baby. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the logic there is just the Kirk Cousins. Every year he's been in the league for the past 5 years. His teams are always top 5 in the NFL in pass attempts, and maybe you want to attribute that to the offensive coordinator. Well, great, they have Zach Robinson in there at OC, who I think I guess he's a bit of a black box, but at least comes from the right tree of coordinators that we could expect him to throw a bunch to. And
the passing game he was a passing game coordinator for the Rams too. So I don't, maybe he's a guy who loves to run the ball, who got pigeonholed in the passing game or something. But he's, odds are that he's probably inclined to pass a fair amount. And that tree is not the Andy Reid style. But they generally are positive pass rate over expected. And honestly, the team, kind of the next most pass heavy team last year, was really the Bengals, and that Zach Taylor is a McVay guy too. So there's upside that they could pass a ton.
Exactly. And I think that's enough for me to move London to the top of this big tier. Like, I don't think I'm going to take him over Nico Collins, Garrett Wilson. That's maybe another discussion, but I think I like him at the front of this big tier of wide receivers that I don't know what to do with, just because I think the upside is there, and it certainly takes a bit of a projection. Like, we haven't seen Drake London in a high passing volume offense. His rookie year, that was that disgustingly low. Like, I think they were at like 24 pass attempts per game with Mariota, like really, really dreadful passing volume. He accumulated a huge target share that year. So it takes a bit of projection to be like, okay, this guy who had a 30% target share when they were throwing, 2 times in the second half with Marcus Mariota, he's going to do that again on a real offense. It takes a bit of a projection, but I think it can, I don't see why it can't happen. I mean, Darnell Mooney isn't going to take a bunch of targets. Like Kyle Pitts, I mean, you can be optimistic about him, but it's still, we're talking about the number 2 weapon here being a tight end who's been very underwhelming for 2 straight years. So I think that the target upside is just massive for London if it hits.
Yeah, no, I think I mostly agree. Where I would push back on like a rank like 13 would be, I mean, we are having a quarterback here who's coming off a torn Achilles, And it doesn't seem like the market is pricing that in.
Yeah, we're just Achilles injuries don't exist anymore, Pat. Come on, it's 2024. They don't matter.
I guess. But like kind of and it was fairly late in the season. I mean, the Rodgers one I'm a little bit more willing to overlook. Maybe he's just gaslit me into thinking it was Achilles, doesn't matter. But,
yeah, he's definitely gaslit you.
Yeah,
he was not coming back then.
He was never coming back. Yeah, no, definitely not. But I mean, his was, Cousins was later in the year. I think he's fine. He's a pocket passer. Mobility is not the concern. Like he's probably totally fine. But like, I would like, probably totally fine and didn't tear your Achilles are different, and so there's like
I don't know. Are you a doctor? Can you say that?
I think I don't know if they make you go to medical school for just did or did not tear your Achilles, but no, I think London. I mean, once you start taking him kind of in that Nico Collins range, like Nico's totally healthy. We know
I'm not taking over Nico.
Yeah, but I mean that's where you're kind of talking about if he's getting up that high. So,
yeah. No, I cited the third. Yeah, I personally would not rank him at 13, but I think it'd be close. I think I'd rank him so I'm just looking at the ETR ranks here. They have Nico 14, London 13, Kyren 15, Ayuk 16. I think I would drop London behind Kyren and Nico.
Yeah,
but ahead of Ayuk and Debo and stuff. But yeah,
and Marvin Harrison is a guy. I still have Marvin Harrison ahead of him, which that's probably controversial for you. So are you? I mean, because here's another thing with the other side of the London case that I think Harrison helps illustrate a little bit is that like I'm not like fully sold that London is this kind of superstar talent. I know he was a really good prospect. He hasn't been off the charts in his efficiency so far, and he was in bad situation. So I'm not saying he's bad or anything, but 1.87 yards per route run last year is good to borderline great given the situation.
Yeah.
But his open score is a little concerning to me, and that's sort of like what he's supposed to be. Open score of 61 over the last two seasons. If you look at all wide receivers, he's wide receiver 32 over the last 2 years in that. I'm not like fully sold that he's a kind of superstar level talent. And look, if we're taking a guy that early, that's the bet. Now, Harrison, we've never seen play an NFL snap. We don't know that he's going to be on the Cardinals. I'm open to push back on that, but that's the bet you're making. You're like, this is the best wide receiver prospect since Chase. He's going to be a superstar right away. And so the London part of it is like, I'm still a little, I could certainly see it happening, but it's like, man, just kind of penciling him in for that like ultra efficiency. That I am struggling a little bit with that part of the bet once the price moves into like the early second round.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think of the open score thing, what makes me feel a little bit better about it is that he grades out really well in Harmon's reception perception stuff. And we've talked about it. There's very different methodology between those two. And I think ultimately you should be looking at both. But this is just a film take for me, is that London is the type of player that probably grades out better in a charting method that's accounting for more nuance in terms of what separation means. Like he's not a freak athlete in terms of speed, but I think his body positioning, like his size, he's massive on the field compared to most wide receivers and cornerbacks. And I think he gets open in the intermediate in a way that's kind of Puka Nacua-esque if you're looking for a ceiling case, right? Like, a type of guy that isn't wide open, but he can do the dirty work over the middle, just bigger, more physical in the corners around him, so can rack up a bunch of yak. I think that's kind of like the upside case I'm imagining in my head with Drake London.
Yeah, he's on the Puka Michael Pittman spectrum.
Exactly.
Where does he fall in that spectrum is kind of the question.
Yeah, and I'm not certain. I'm totally with you that like I think I'm usually, I feel like in these arguments the guy's like, I don't know, I haven't seen it yet with Garrett Wilson. Like, are we sure we should be taking him? The guy tied to the guy who's might be vice president of the United States. Are we sure We should be taking
No,
him at 10 overall.
It's over. It can't be vice president.
Yeah, he was thwarted by Shanahan once again.
New York Times with the dunk tweet, beautiful.
Yeah, it was a great tweet. But anyways, yeah, I feel like I'm normally on that side of things, so I hear you with London. Like, if you want like a safer pick, I think Ayuk, Devontae Adams. I think well, that's the age, so that's different. But I think there's
no, it's flat. I mean, here the big thing is that it's flat.
Yeah.
So any bull cases are gonna be easy to smack down. Like the Harrison one, it's got some holes in it. I'm making it. It's got some holes in it. Devin Achane, big Achane guy. He might be a committee back.
He might be the RB2 on his own team.
He might be the RB2 on his own team who would take him in the second round. There's some holes. There's some holes in every single one of these guys in this range. To me, I think I don't see a ton of holes actually in Kyren. I didn't expect to be a Kyren bull, but he was, pretty good last year. And there's no reason to think he doesn't kind of have the similar role. I think the offense is pretty good. So I'm kind of happy to take Kyren, but yeah, I mean, you could say the holes start really after Gibbs. You got because you could say the Garrett Wilson stuff. We've never fully seen it. I'm happy to take Wilson. I'm happy to take Kyren. Nico starts to feel a little shakier and sort of like we've seen it for 1 year. What if they draft somebody? Is Tank Dell better if he's healthy? Kind of, whatever. That's where you can start to really poke holes. Then you get to Harrison type guys. I mean, that's where we're talking about London.
Yeah, we're talking about Jacoby Brissett's wide receiver 1, Marvin Harrison. So it's start to be some big holes that emerge in the argument.
That's definitely a pretty easy bear case for sure. What? So like, I don't know if is there a just mix it up in that range, or how are you playing that pretty flat tier?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on fading Taylor and Barkley. For me, I think I can like mix it up in that range and still be like overexposed to all the wide receivers more or less. I think like it's a boring take. Like I wish I could come here and say like this is why Brandon Ayuk is like way better than Rashee Rice, and I have all the numbers to prove it, but I can't do that. Like it's just I'm mixing these guys up, and even the veterans like the Devontae and Diggs types, especially Diggs. Like I've been getting a ton of Diggs. I feel like
me too.
People are overreacting to the second half splits last year. Like I get the risk, but also like he was so dominant to start the year, and now we're just kind of ignoring that. And he's the wide receiver 1 for Josh Allen, and you can get him really late. So I mean, not really late, but at the end of that tier. So yeah,
that stack is very attainable too. I actually moved Diggs up ahead of Allen, partly with the idea of like I'm going to try to take more Diggs, push Allen around, because knowing you can't stack Allen, he's not that like the Diggs guy's sitting right there now. He's blocking you from potentially like if Kincaid comes at a value like in the 6th, or you get Cook is a value, or I guess maybe not really ahead of ADP in the 4th, but you can get kind of boxed out of Bills if you take Allen at like without Diggs at the 2-3 turn. So I don't like doing it, and my hope is that other people don't like doing it. So I take Diggs, hope to get Allen coming around. It generally works out pretty well. Not every time, obviously, but that's something I've been trying to do. And man, when you get the Diggs Allen stack, it's pretty fun. Yeah. So yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on.
Wait, can we talk? Yeah. So this is kind of back to fallers, but we brought up the ETR ranks and wanted to get your thoughts on Taylor and Barkley, because I've been out here kind of just fighting. This is like when reinforcements arrive. Like I've been out here like fighting this market, okay, fighting every day since before the Super Bowl, and I'm on my last breath here, and you guys are fucking Gandalf. The sun shines, and I'm looking at the ETR ranks, and it's got Jonathan Taylor 29 and Saquon Barkley 32. Like, Oh, baby.
Reinforcements.
Yeah, the Helm's Deep was about to fall, So this is big. Like Jonathan Taylor's got an ADP of 15.7, Barkley 17.1. I've been behind market the entire way. Very, very little, but I would like to take some of these guys at the 2-3 turn, and I'm hoping ETR can move the market here for me. Where are you at on those dudes?
Yeah, so we're trying to help you out here. I'll talk to Leone and Jack and
I mean you're behind me, so like you're good. You've already done your job.
Yeah, I really wanted to I feel like we've had a lot of battles in ADP chasing last year. I really wanted to be the pro Barkley, like pro running back guy for like a good bit throughout this offseason. But I don't quite have the heart to do it. I do think let me lay out like the devil's advocate case like a little bit. Because I think I disagree with you like slightly on Barkley, even though I'm still fading him. I think like the yards per route run stuff that we're nitpicking with Saquon Barkley, like come on, he's playing with Daniel Jones and Tyrod.
Yeah, now he's gonna get thrown to all the time by Jalen Hurts. You're right. Yeah, who cares?
Yeah, so that's the thing is that I think that like if you're making the argument that like Saquon is some diminished talent because of his efficiency stats, his yards per route run, etc. Like I disagree with that.
That's not my case. That it's a receiver. I'm just saying it's always been overblown. The dude is never. I mean, like I don't know. Be efficient.
Okay, but his rookie.
Be efficient one time.
Yeah, but there was the one time he didn't have Daniel Jones as his quarterback.
2018, Sam.
Yeah,
it was in 2018.
It was literally the one time he didn't play with Daniel Jones, and he was.
Think about how different you were in 2018, and then tell me his receiving efficiency is what we should be using as the signal.
I'm just saying receiving efficiency for running backs is like Derrick Henry like led the league in yards per route run like last year. Like
yes,
shit like that.
At small samples, yards per route run gets really wonky. Sure.
Yeah, and when you're playing with Daniel fucking Jones, I'm taking the yards per route run stat and I'm throwing.
But dude, he ran 549 routes 2 years ago. That's a shitload of routes.
Name me one pass catcher. Who's one pass catcher in the Giants that's been fantasy relevant with Daniel Jones? One.
Darius Slayton, honestly. He's been consistently, he won't go away.
Yeah, exactly. So that's your best pass catcher with fantasy relevancy with Daniel Jones is Darius Slayton. And I'm willing to give Saquon a pass. Now, finish my argument, he's now in a terrible situation for receiving production on the Eagles. So that's why I was really hoping he would go to the Texans because then I would love to go to war with his yards per route run stuff. But man, so here's the case. Like what you need to believe for Barkley to be a value at whatever he's at 17, you got to believe the tush push is either highly diminished or the Eagles decide not to use it because they want to save Jalen Hurts to the playoffs. I think plausible. I wouldn't.
It is plausible.
Yeah, plausible, right? And then 2, you need to believe that Saquon is some receiving talent that changes how the Eagles use running backs in the passing game. And I don't really believe that. So, yeah, I think it's just like the touchdown case is like if I lose on Barkley, I'd be shocked if it's, they find a way to integrate him in the passing game in a way I didn't expect. And he's massively better than DeAndre Swift and Miles Sanders and Kenny Gainwell were in terms of volume in the passing attack. I don't think that's how I lose. I think I lose because he scores 20. Like the Eagles return to being, this behemoth offense, but instead of QB sneaks with Jalen Hurts, they hand it off to Saquon Barkley and he scores 20 touchdowns or something, right? That's how we lose. And I don't think that's impossible, but I think the price doesn't reflect the likelihood of it, I guess.
No, I think he's a pretty good 2-3 turn pick. I'd be happy, if he was in the early third, I'd be taking a fair amount of him. To me, it's like you're betting that he's Miles Sanders plus from 2 years ago, and that could be pretty cool. But I'm having trouble with the ADP so far. I just think the ADP so far has been kind of nuts, and I'm hoping that it falls. ideally we don't have to like, if the guy has upside, which I agree he does, then I would like to not be fading him aggressively.
Yeah.
Right. Because that sucks. It sucks to have to fade a guy who I do think has upside, but I do think, if he's going, and I know it's flat, but like I want to be mixing up these other bets. I don't think he's in that tier is kind of what it comes down to. I don't think he's in that tier of all these different guys who I would like exposure to here. I'm having trouble getting enough Devontae Adams. I'm taking Adams over Barkley. So that's where I'm struggling. But if he were to show up in the early third, I wouldn't be like stubborn about it at that point, because if he is a better version of Sanders 2 years ago, like he will pay off a third round price tag. He can pay off that second round price tag if he scores enough touchdowns. He does have the ability to pay off a second round price tag. He does. I don't want to bet on him with a second round pick though.
Yeah, I don't.
What about Taylor? I mean, you've been less bullish on Taylor generally.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like I was the one who was alone in fading Taylor last year because of the Richardson stuff. Well, I guess eventually the market caught up to me because he did well. No, let me take.
It's hard to know what the market.
He dropped mostly because of the holdout stuff.
The holdout stuff, yeah.
But anyways, last year I was like JT at the 1-2 turn. This is crazy once you factor in a rookie quarterback. Usually rookie quarterbacks lead bad offenses. A rookie quarterback that is Derrick Henry size and is going to steal a bunch of the goal line and is very unlikely to, check down. I was like, why am I paying a 1-2 turn price for this guy? And again, I think this year it's kind of the same thing. I think what makes me slightly more excited about Taylor.
By Zach Moss for much of the season.
Yeah, outplayed by Zach Moss so much of the season. I do think I have like a little bit more confidence that Richardson can lead a competent offense and that they're going to play with a fast pace. Like, I think those are two data points we can take away from last year. But, man, I just don't think – like, I've kind of always been a bit of a Taylor hater. Like, kind of one good season in 4 years, more or less. I mean, his rookie season was up and down. But, yeah, like –
he was good as a rookie. He wasn't amazing as a rookie, but he was good.
He was good. It just took him, like, he didn't play ahead of, like Jordan Wilkins and Marlon Mack for a huge chunk of the year, right? Like, he was kind of benched at one point. I don't know. Maybe I'm remembering
I don't think so. I mean, Mack tore his Achilles, didn't he? I can't remember. But my recollection of the Jonathan Taylor experience is that he came on middle of the season and kind of rolled.
Yeah.
And I mean, his efficiency was awesome as a rookie. He was... Even despite having the limited touches, he had 151 rush yards over expected, behind only Derrick Henry, Nick Chubb, J.K. Dobbins, Ronald Jones, and Dalvin Cook. So he was really good that year. You're right. We didn't have the full volume. And then 2021, he was absolutely off the charts. 2022, that's when we learned who Sam Ellinger was. And then 2023, that's my concern, though, is 2023 was not all that efficient. And
yeah, I mean, if you're worse than a running back that we all thought was out of the league and terrible, it's probably not good.
It's not great. Yeah, 34% success rate, which is pretty bad. Rush yards over expected were not bad, but not great. And yeah, I mean, it happens quick at running back. You get a guy who's big and incredibly fast, and he's unstoppable, and then a guy's big and he's fast and he's not unstoppable is kind of like the concern with me with Taylor. And it's like, if you have other risk factors, right? Like if you put Taylor in a perfect situation, all right, yeah, let's do it. But like, he's not in a perfect situation. So,
and
I feel similar to him about Barkley, like second, third round price is what I really want to pay.
I think, but like if I'm comparing Barkley and Taylor though, it's like easier for me to see the scenario where Barkley gets 20 touchdowns than Taylor. Like, I can see like the Eagles, I can just see being a top 3 scoring offense in the NFL. Like we've seen it before. I can see how we see it again. Like I am an Anthony Richardson guy for fantasy. I don't see the Colts being a top 3 scoring offense. And, anything could happen. Taylor can get super lucky on touchdowns, but like that case of him just getting you a shit ton of touchdowns seems so much thinner for Taylor than Barkley to me.
I mean, I do agree. You have the similar type of worry about, goal line touchdown. It's a concern for both backs. With both backs, you have a path to them breaking away for long touchdowns because the offense is overly concerned about the quarterback. I like that for both guys, but which offense can just be absolutely crushing week in, week out, putting up a ton of points? It's the Eagles by a lot. I mean, Richardson is a cheat code for fantasy, but he's not Jalen Hurts as a real life player right now.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you got Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman versus AJ Brown and Devonta Smith,
Damn, dude. What did Josh Downs do to you?
We're talking about real wide receivers that play in 2 wide receiver sets, Pat. We're not talking about slot guys.
God damn. Josh Downs is good, man. Josh Downs is good. He's that guy.
I like Josh Downs.
Yeah, I'm taking a lot of Josh Downs. All right, what else risers do you want to?
I want to talk Marquise Brown a little bit. He's obviously got the Chiefs bump. We knew somebody would get it. So I think the thing with him is similar to Jacobs in a sense. He saw this pretty massive decline in 2023 from what he was doing in prior years. And not necessarily, I'm not talking like fantasy points per game, that type of stuff, though he did decline in that as well. You look at reception perception, he'd always kind of graded out as a 60 to 75th percentile guy in the metric I look at there. That dropped to 30% in 2023. You look at open score, he was always sort of a 70 to 80 percentile guy in open score 2020 to 2022. That dropped to 20 percentile in 2023. So big drops in sort of separation, getting open across the board in both those metrics. His targets didn't really dip too much, but his yards per route run also dipped pretty considerably from his career average. So yeah, I guess that's the question for me is like, is this heel thing, can that explain everything and that's going to go away and he's fine? Or are we looking at a diminished player where lower body injuries have just built up over the years and he's not going to return to who he once was? I think that's the question with Marquise Brown, number one. And number two is, are the Chiefs going to draft a wide receiver in the first round? That's the second big question. Yeah. So I think he's got some bullets he has to dodge on both of those concerns. So I don't know. I think like 70 ADP I'm still in. My hunch is like he could rise to a point where I'm not going to be in. But yeah, I don't know. It's a tough situation overall for him, I think.
I think that hunch is right. He's been one of the guys who really has moved up quickly. Yeah. We talked about like the market kind of moving slowly on some of these guys, but like Marquise Brown has risen a lot. And I know that we want to think about things in terms of like raw pick and stuff, but like it takes like a lot. We want to think about things not in terms of raw pick, but in percent change. But like it takes a lot. It's a lot of picks that Marquise Brown has had to move up. Like people have been thinking about Marquise Brown, using ranks that have him ranked higher. Like he's been kind of top of mind, which makes sense because he just went to the Chiefs. But I think he's going to continue to rise. I don't think that goes away. I think somewhere in the early 6th round feels about right to me. If he gets into the 5th, if he gets into the late 4th, I do think I would be fading him at that point. There's the kind of the question of like, what was he ever? You know? Because he's an undersized player. Yeah, he's 5'9". He's listed at 180 now. I think he entered the league at like 165. So he's a smaller guy, and you're not going to be winning contested catches. If he can't separate as well anymore, that'd be a major problem. And then his yards per route run career, 1.83, 1.85 first 2 years, both pretty good. Down to 1.61 in his final year in Baltimore, 1.44 in his first year in Arizona, 1.25 last year. So, yeah, he bounces back this year, you would hope, but what? I almost would compare him maybe like, is he going to be kind of Brandon Cooks like from last year? Where you're going to get, I bet we get a couple really nice games out of Marquise Brown, but I think he's going to be largely disappointing, maybe even at this ADP.
Yeah. And it's just weird because I think like I was listening to some shows, and I think people have this perception of Marquise Brown, like he's this deep threat, like George Pickens type, I don't know, receiver in a sense that he wins deep down the field. Like what we've seen most recently for him, like you look at his yards per reception, I know boomer stat, but 2021, 2022, he's at like 10 yards per reception. That means, he needs 100 catches to get to those 1,000 yards. So I think people are plugging him in as like, oh, he'll take away the Justin Watson, the Marquise Valdez-Scantling, like X wide receiver outside deep route stuff. That's like kind of not what he's done in the recent part of his career. So to me, it's like I have a hard time like understanding exactly where he fits into the offense. Like some of what he did, particularly in Arizona, in terms of where he was winning, is like a little bit duplicative with what Rashee Rice and Travis Kelce have done, sort of winning more shallow, winning versus zone. That's another thing. You look at his reception perception, he's a zone beater at wide receiver, not a man beater. And that's also
not great. They already have 2 zone beaters. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So that's what I'm just like, the money thing too. It's like, is he just going to be like all these other Chiefs wide receivers have been the past couple years where plays 70% of the snaps, 60% of the snaps, and it's just like underwhelming. Like, I don't know. I think I'm talking down on him a lot. I do think, like, to be clear, I think at 70 ADP, like I'm still fine with it. But yeah, my gut is just like this keeps on rising. The Chiefs hype keeps on building, and I'm probably gonna be out, but we'll see.
No, I think I'll eventually be out. I'm anticipating that I will be out eventually. I don't mind taking him now, partly because I think he continues to rise. I think we could also see him rise a lot more quickly, depending on what they do in the draft. But let's say they don't really bring in anybody of note. They bring in like a 4th round guy or whatever, which would be a bit of a surprise. But they've kind of, taken a little bit of a less urgent approach at wide receiver in some years than we were expecting.
Yeah.
Maybe they bring in someone in the 3rd, let's say, but it's not, we don't expect Marquise Brown's routes to be challenged at all. I could see him very quickly in a new tournament jumping a lot, jumping to the early 5th or something. So I'm definitely down to take him, but I do share some of your concerns. And in the note about yards per reception, I mean, it is kind of a boomer stat if you're using it as like a measure of skill, but I don't think it's a boomer stat if you're saying like this is the kind of guy that we're talking about. It's similar to ADOT, and if you look at ADOT for Justin Watson last year, he was at 17.9. He was at 19.3 before that. Marcus Valdes-Scantling was at 17.8 last year, 15.1 in his first year. With the Chiefs and with the Packers, he was at ADOTs of 18.2, 18.2, 16.6, entered the league at 13.8. When you look at Marquise Brown, he peaked with an ADOT of 14 with Baltimore in his 2nd season. His ADOTs have been 12.6, 12, 11.7, 12.7. That's kind of more like a lot of like true wide receivers, true wide receiver ones will have that kind of average depth of target. That's like it generally signals like a mix of target types. But if the idea is like he's going to be kind of this true deep threat, that's not really who he is. Justin Jefferson had an ADOT of 13.5 last year. Okay. That's not, and again, Marquise Brown was at 12.7. So Justin Jefferson is not a deep threat. Justin Jefferson is a guy who can do everything. Marquise Brown will be asked probably to do a variety of things, which could be good, but it could also be like, do they need to still have Justin Watson out there stretching the field sometimes? Like how
even like blocking, like do they need Justin Watson out there to like do they need a bigger guy for blocking out there? Like it sounds crazy, but that's why they have MVS, Justin Watson, these like bigger guys in the field sometimes. Like can Marquise Brown be on the field to make a block for Isaiah Pacheco on an outside run? I'm not so sure. So yeah, I agree. I think it's just a wide range of outcomes. I don't want to ignore we're going from the past 2 years, like Clayton Tune, Kyler Murray to Patrick Mahomes. Like it could just click, right? And I see the upside, but
sure.
I guess like to put a more concrete like touch on it, like Christian Kirk is at an ADP of 55. I don't think I'll ever like click Marquise Brown ahead of Christian Kirk. Because I see kind of a similar type of player in some ways, but just in a much more secure role that I know is going to be much higher volume. So
I agree. I think Kirk's a great kind of line in the sand of like, I'm not taking Brown over Kirk. I mean, maybe they draft somebody early, but as of right now, I'm not taking Brown over Kirk.
Yeah. Cool. We can. I had two more guys here. Want to talk about you? Do you got time, or do you want me to
No,
pick one of them? Okay.
No,
cool. Joe Mixon. This, we talked about DeAndre Swift's contract and not understanding that. This contract, I understood even less. Like
this was so
I was
dumb.
like, yeah, it was so. I was like starting. It actually like shook me to my core in my faith of the Texans franchise. Like I wanted to be all in on CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Tank Dell, and like I know it's unrelated and like shouldn't matter, but I like felt worse about the entire franchise when they made the signing.
Here's the thing. So what I'm starting to notice a pattern, and it has yet to happen more than once, so it should not be a pattern, but it's already a pattern in my mind. Here's the way this goes. Texans do something pretty sharp, okay? They do something that maybe people didn't think they should do, but it ends up being a really sharp move. Taking CJ Stroud, great. We were all too low. Texans nailed it. We were wrong. Trading for Joe Mixon with a 6th round pick. We're all kind of out on Joe Mixon. 6th round pick though, pretty good. So good job. Yeah. Good job, Texans. Now, next move the Texans do. Something crazy. Trade up for Will Anderson. So, get a franchise quarterback immediately, surrender a ton of picks to go get a defensive player. Okay. I wasn't expecting that. Get Joe Mixon at a cheap, cost-controlled 1-year deal. Give him an extension. What? That makes no sense. Okay. But then Will Anderson wins Defensive Player of the Year. Rookie of the Year. Sorry. Defensive Rookie of the Year. And Mixon, he's gonna crush. Okay, it's gonna work.
Mixon's gonna get your Mixon MVP tickets in right now.
Yeah.
Oh man,
I'm telling you. Yeah. I actually think I kind of like Mixon at this price.
Yeah, no, I like him at this price. I was just talking from a real life. I don't understand it, but yeah,
no.
The thing is with Mixon, like we don't need to go through all the advanced stats. It's boring. No one wants to hear it, but trust me, just look at the advanced stats from last couple of years. Mixon,
you can say advanced stats on Mixon. I won't stop you.
People don't come to ADP chasing for the numbers. They come for the film takes.
Well, you seem a little more hesitant to say the bad numbers about running backs than wide receivers. I have to say. You were happy to talk about Marquise Brown's yards per reception.
Okay, you want to hear the numbers? This is Mixon versus Singletary. Success rate. This is just last year, so we're looking at 1 year. Mixon was this is all out of 49 qualifying backs. In success rate, Mixon was 15th, Singletary was 28th. Rush yards over expected per attempt, Mixon was 27th, Singletary was 24th, so slightly worse than Singletary. Look at PFF rush grade, Mixon was 32nd, Singletary was 27th, again, slightly worse. PFF receiving grade, Mixon 16th, Singletary 32nd, so Mixon slightly better. Yards per route run, Mixon 24th, Singletary 45th. So again, Mixon slightly better. That's a lot of numbers to say. Is that like I just think of Joe Mixon as Devin Singletary, but a little bit better as a receiver. And Singletary was like a high-end RB2 last year once he took that job. I think Mixon just has like a little bit more ceiling than that because of his pass catching. So pick 66, like with the money they gave him, I'm probably hammering Mixon at 66.
No, I agree. I mean, he's Devin Singletary, a little bit of a better receiver, and he's going to have one really awesome game this season.
He's going to have that 5-touchdown game.
Yeah, he's going to score 5 touchdowns one time, and it won't be the week we play him in DFS. That's Joe Mixon experience. And you just got to get on board with it if it's not overpriced, and I don't think it's overpriced here. Where would Mixon have to go where you'd be like, all right, that's too much?
That's a good question. Probably they're just, it's so funny looking at the draft boards. I was trying to compare them to other running backs, but all it takes is 2 running backs and you get to pick 46. There's just no running backs to go in this range. Yeah, I don't know. He strikes me as if he's in the late 4th, early 5th, that's still fine to me. Around pick 50. I guess, so are we talking, let's say the draft happens, the Texans don't draft running back. It's Damian Pierce, Dario Agumbawale, and Joe Mixon. At that point, I think the 40s, I'm fine with Joe Mixon.
I agree. I think you could justifiably take him in the 40s for sure. I doubt I draft him much there just because of structural stuff, unless we get some really awesome landing spots for some of these rookie wide receivers that make me feel comfortable taking them. And I think this is fairly plausible, but taking them, around the early 70s. And I'm talking about obviously not Brian Thomas, but after that, the Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Troy Franklin, Keon Coleman, that whole group, Lad McConkey, right? All those guys. And I'm taking a lot of these guys, so I hope that does happen. But, if they're dudes we have to take and are excited to take, in the 70 to 80s, where currently it's literally just would you like to take Christian Watson? Otherwise, you're not taking a receiver. And then after pick 80, it's there's Christian Watson or 18 running backs. You pick. so that's where structurally I would start to probably fade him just purely for that. But I don't have any pushback in terms of what that kind of running back would be worth. I think he'd probably be worth late 40s kind of pick.
Yeah, it's hard to say if this current drafting meta where we basically now decided that we take wide receivers in the first 6 rounds and we take running backs from round 7 to 10, and there's no intermixing of positions. We've all disagreed as an industry. That's how it works now. Just wait until round 7. You can get the RB15 for some reason. He's still available in round 7 now. And if that's how it works, it's
self-reinforcing. What I mean, and I, you know where I stand on this. I think this is fairly efficient because it's sort of it's hard to swim against, because the more it happens and the more you can get okay, you took Jalen Warren at pick 40, but I can get Najee Harris or Jalen Warren at pick 80. I can, which they're both there, so it's whoever I like more. Or I can get David Montgomery in the late 60s, early 70s, or whatever. That kind of back who, you'd rather have Mixon, but how much more, and the 2v2 start to favor you. It's you're right. It's it's tough. It's tough to swim against.
All I'll say about Jalen Warren and Najee Harris is get ready to learn CPAT goal line packages, buddy. You're gonna have Justin Fields out there in the Taysom Hill role, Cordarrelle Patterson lined up next to him, Najee and Jalen Warren just so deep on the sidelines they have their helmets off. So good luck with that one.
Our generation's Travis Homer.
Yeah, our generation's Travis Homer. Oh man. But yeah, I agree. I wanted to talk Curtis Samuel, and then we'll get out of here. This one, I'm super excited about this Curtis Samuel thing, and the market's kind of excited, but clearly not as excited as me. So here, let's start I'll lay out the bull case for Curtis Samuel. Here are the quarterbacks he's played with over the last 5 years. 2019, it was Kyle Allen. 2020, Teddy Bridgewater on his 3rd team. People had given up on him at that point. 2021, Samuel was injured. Then 2022, Carson Wentz and Taylor Heineke, the Commanders version of Carson Wentz, when he was wearing, 3 different teams' practice jerseys, trying to get a team.
The guy who didn't find a job the year after.
Yeah, exactly. 2023, Sam Howell, who was taking sacks at an unprecedented rate, and then Jacoby Brissett, who I actually think Jacoby Brissett is good. But anyways, those are his quarterbacks he's played with this past 5 years. He has not been, obviously, we never think of Curtis Samuel as some fantasy superstar, but he's always been relevant every year in the past 5 years, like he's been a guy that's like, oh, Curtis Samuel is on waivers and he projects as a wide receiver 3 this week. Like last year, he is somehow out targeting Terry McLaurin on a per route basis the whole season. Like he's always been hanging around, being relevant. The reception perception stuff, loves him. Matt Harmon's always been a Curtis Samuel guy. He checked in last year, 75th percentile in sort of this success rate over expected metric I look at. So yeah, I just think like I'm bullish on Curtis Samuel's talent. I think he's been handed a raw deal by the NFL in terms of what teams he's played for. And it's pretty wide open in Buffalo for the wide receiver 2 and 3 role there. So yeah, curious what you think, Pat. He'd be a guy like if the roster is as it is today, I would probably take him in like the 100, like late 90s range. Maybe that's crazy.
That I would have trouble with him there. I got sniped on him yesterday because I had a Josh Allen stack lined up, and I actually pushed wide receiver a little bit further. I forget who I passed on exactly, but it was probably like A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Worthy, one of those guys. I was like, I'm going to go ahead and grab Curtis Samuel later. And he got sniped. So I was pretty disappointed in that. And I think if I can get him, especially stacked, in kind of what is ADP is like 129, that's unstacked. I think already starting to feel like a little high just in terms of like he's going to be, kind of the number 3 target earner probably on his team, and not like a particularly high upside kind of archetype of dude. But I get what you're saying. I mean, this is by far the best quarterback, like by far the best quarterback play he'll ever
He's
have.
been on bottom 3 NFL offenses like his entire career.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I guess what I would say, if I'm making the bear case, I would say by the end of last season, he passed Jahan Dotson, but it took a while and he never really did it like in a major, he never kind of made a statement that he was clearly the guy over Dotson. Dotson was really bad last year. So that's, how good is Curtis Samuel? Because we're assuming he's a lot better than we've seen, but like he might just be kind of a rotational veteran that the Bills are adding as a rotational veteran kind of thing.
Yeah, though they didn't, I guess my pushback on that is they didn't really pay him as a rotational veteran. I mean, he got $15 million guaranteed. That pretty steadily cleared what Mike Williams and Marquise Brown got. I guess for some reason he didn't get as much money as Darnell Mooney, who's way better than all those guys for some reason. But yeah, I think like the money is a sign to me that he's starting, but it certainly could be he's their starting slot wide receiver.
I think that's the thing. I think that's probably what he is. He's their starting slot receiver. Yeah.
Here's the downside, right? Is that a 3 wide receiver rotation of Stephon Diggs, Curtis Samuel, and Khalil Shakir doesn't really make any sense. Like there's a lot of duplication there, a lot of small dudes out there. I think they're gonna add a big X receiver. I think like Xavier, Leggett, Keon Coleman, one of those type guys.
Mitchell. I think A.D. Mitchell would make a lot of sense for them.
Exactly, right? So then we're talking
Brian Thomas is the dream.
Yeah.
But I don't think he'll be there.
Yeah. So if they add one of those guys with significant draft capital, which I think is likely, then we're talking like probably a rotation at wide receiver where like Shakir mixes in for 30% snaps. Samuel is at 70, something like that, right? Or it could even be worse than that, like if you're a Khalil Shakir guy. So I do see the downside. But yeah, I guess like there's a chance, right? They don't get one of these wide receivers they like, and they sign, I don't know, who's a Devontae Parker equivalent that's still available for an X wide receiver, like sign someone like that who's just running clear out routes. I think there's some upside with Curtis Samuel in a scenario like that, where they just have like a guy clearing space out there. And yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's like, as I said, you look at targets per route run. Samuel cleared Terry McLaurin last year. I think he could clear Dalton Kincaid if he cleared Terry McLaurin. Like, I don't think that's a crazy scenario. So yeah.
No, it's not. It's not.
Yeah. I just think 130, right, is just like it just feels like we get so excited about the Bills and Chiefs, and like Curtis Samuel, I guess, just doesn't cross that threshold for whatever reason. But
and he has been pretty. I take your point. I mean, he's been like pretty good. He's been like a quiet, like, I don't want to say league winner because he hasn't been, but like he was a pretty good best ball pick 2 years in a row.
Yeah.
You know, he's been a guy you were happy to have on teams. He had a week 15 spike week, I think, too, this past year. I mean, he was like he wasn't great, but just like a helpful dude who's out there running routes and can occasionally pop off for a spike week. And kind of the Zay Jones type of mold, like a little bit underrated for his ability to be out there and earn targets sometimes. Obviously a little bit different of an archetype of receiver, but similar in just being out there a lot and earning targets. So yeah, I mean, I guess it just, how much are you trying to price in the addition, and then does he fall? I mean, and I think he does fall, right? Like if they bring in a Keon Coleman,
yeah,
isn't he down to like the 150s, 160s?
Yeah, I guess maybe. Like I guess I'm fine eating that type of loss, but I don't know. I guess I'm not even really trying to make like a closing line value case, because I think the market has kind of showed us like we're not that excited.
And who cares about the closing line value? Usually they're going to hit or not.
Yeah, exactly. And I just think like like a guy with a path to being the Bills' second target earner, like a pretty plausible path. Again, his 3-year contract up to $30 million. It was really $15 million guaranteed. Like that's not nothing. Obviously, guys who get that money do fail sometimes. Like we see it all the time where guys.
And it's not. Yeah, he's getting paid like $9 million this year. I think like his yearly cash this year is $8.6 million and $7.4 million next year. So it's not. There's a 3-year deal. So yeah, I mean it's basically a 2-year deal they can get out of after 2025. He's getting like, around $8.5 million a year in those first 2 years. So
my point is like
not a ton of money, but it's not nothing.
Yeah, the market looked at Marquise Brown, Mike Williams, and Curtis Samuel, and they pretty decidedly said Curtis Samuel is worth the most out of those 3 guys, and those 2 guys go way higher than him. And I get they've had more fantasy relevance for sure in their career, so I get it, but it's just like, I don't know. I just think like in terms of how the NFL looked at these wide receivers this offseason, Curtis Samuel seems a little undervalued to me. And really the big point is like,
I'm with you.
Yeah, the big point is like, man, it's not just that his offenses were terrible quarterback play. It was also like really weirdly crowded wide receiver rooms. Like he got this big contract from Washington, got hurt his entire first year on the contract, and then they bring in, Jahan Dotson, new regime, Terry McLaurin's there. Like he's had to work his way into the offense because it hasn't been the plan for his teams to use him in a featured role. Like he's kind of like had to fight his way. And now finally a team this year in the Bills is like, we actually want you to be our wide receiver too, potentially. So yeah.
But what about him versus Jerry Jeudy? It's kind of an interesting one because, sort of similar situation. Yeah. New team, gets paid. There's a tight end who gets targets there. There's a number 1 quarterback play, obviously much better in Buffalo, but I think we probably feel a little bit better about Judy's role and them not adding somebody. So you're and they're right next to each other in ADP. Judy's at 126, Samuel's at 129.
Yeah. I just take, man, I've seen enough of Deshaun Watson the past 2 years, I think, to just take Samuel there. But I get it. Like Judy's role seems much more certain to me. So I get it, but like I just don't think Judy's that great. And I think Deshaun Watson just is done in terms of being a guy who can support like 3 passing weapons. Yeah, I'm just fading that.
That makes sense. Did you have any rookie stuff or
shit.
More I think we can run through.
Yeah, I did have some. We can skip. The point on the running backs is that the market is just like getting too good at this, and like I don't really see any major undervalued or overvalued players.
We're taking Dylan Lube, as we call him on Pete's stream, and Ray Davis. I take a lot of Ray Davis, so I'm happy to see this. Marshawn Lloyd, I'm struggling with.
These guys are in the overvalued segment, Pat.
Oh, damn it. Oh, no. Oh, no. We're taking too much Laube. Okay. Well, I'm not taking Marshawn Lloyd, so I'm happy to see him there. So undervalued Bucky Irving. Yeah, I'm having trouble with him. Braylon Allen. I think Braylon Allen, I was probably too low on for a while. So he's probably a good name to get on the radar. I'm taking him over Marshawn Lloyd now.
Yeah. The draft capital projection just looks pretty good with him compared to Lloyd, especially. Yeah, that's the weird. Like, I think there's a couple of things with this. I think this like consensus big board ranking thing that we look at, it moves a little bit slowly, and it's not perfect. I'm not saying this is like this perfect draft capital metric. I do think it does identify like guys we get too hyped on from the combine. Like this happened a little bit with Izzy Abanikanda last year, where he has this amazing pro day or combine. I forget now.
His pro day, yeah.
And everyone's like, shoot him up. He's third round draft capital. Lock him in. Okay, the big board ranking still is showing he's like a 5th, 6th rounder. I made this mistake too. I'm not saying that, I fell for it. So it's a good sense check of like, okay, does this amazing combine actually translate into increased draft capital? With Lloyd, it's been like a little mix. We're still seeing like 4th round projection for him. So it's a little iffy, but that can change by draft day.
Lloyd also has like a film grade that like when I can like identify immediately like, oh, this dude's really unstructured. Like he's probably, and then it's kind of like the film takeaway on Lloyd is that he's sort of a boom bust runner, maybe not the best in between the tackles, or kind of play like running the play as designed type of guy. And that's concerning in this type of tournament where we don't know landing spots, we don't know draft capital. And so you're kind of like, I like Ray Davis, even at like a quote unquote overvalued. This doesn't like sway me that much on him because my whole bet is like this dude's the exact type of guy who earns playing time as a 4th or 5th round pick. Like Ray Davis is like, lunch pail, hard hat, gets what's supposed to, does what he's supposed to do. He's 24 years old. He's very mature. He's going to come in, and I think he's either good enough to contribute right away, or he's not going to be good enough to ever really do anything. He's not going to have to like, clean some stuff up type of dude. So that's my concern with Lloyd is I do think he probably, it might take, even if he hits, it might take a couple years,
Yeah, that makes sense. And some other guys in this chart, like Irving and Estime, they've been like steadily falling. I think they're going to continue to fall in this like consensus ranking just because their athleticism will honestly just have them off like a lot of teams' boards completely. So I have a hard time seeing those guys. Like, I think like someone like Davis or Lloyd has more upside in their draft capital projection than Estime and Irving do, just because of the athleticism. So again, this chart is not like how I'm actually drafting these guys. It's just sort of a quick look at their projection versus ADP. The wide receiver one is really kind of interesting in that I think last year when we did this, there was a lot of inefficiencies. Now I drew this curved line. Obviously, that's kind of arbitrary in the shape of the line I drew, but like the point is there's not huge divergence.
See Marvin Harrison on the undervalued side there.
Yeah, the funny thing about this chart is I can move the line wherever I want to. And it confirms my priors, so that's where he is.
No, he's undervalued. It doesn't confirm your priors.
Oh fuck. Okay. I
drew the wrong line.
I drew the wrong line. I need another version of this. I did want to start with like the Harrison Nabers Odunze thing, and I get they're ranked in consensus big boards like 4, 5, 6. You look at any NFL mock draft, they go in the top 10. Maybe sometimes Odunze slides to 11 or something, right? But top 12 picks. Like, I don't know. Like maybe I'm just stubborn because where I come from it, Pat, is like I'm not as much as like a prospect guy at certainly as you are and as a lot of people are. I kind of just like I look at the draft capital, I make adjustments for what people are saying, based on their production profiles, athleticism, etc. I do factor that stuff in, but it's like I think the NFL views these three guys like very closely. And then us virgins drafting best ball in March are like, nope, Marvin Harrison's like 3 rounds better than Rome Odunze. And I struggle with it like a little bit, especially because I think these guys are going to be so landing spot dependent that I don't know.
I actually don't think that the NFL views them that similarly, in the sense that I think you have some teams reportedly view Malik Nabers as the wide receiver 1, and some teams, there's been some times that we've seen Odunze go ahead of Malik Nabers in mocks, which would lead you to think, okay, some teams have Odunze ahead of Nabers. Okay, but I haven't heard anything about Odunze is the number 1 wide receiver in this class. I haven't heard that from. I forget which evaluator said he was his favorite wide receiver in the class. I don't know if he means that literally is his wide receiver 1 or not, but that's like the only like one ambiguous comment like that is the only thing I've heard. And it's Harrison or Nabers is the wide receiver 1, generally Harrison. I do think the NFL sees a pretty clear distinction there, and that it's not the wide receiver 1 is not Odunze. I like Odunze. I think he's pretty good at where he's going, but I do used to talk about landing spot. I mean, he's the guy who has risk of the landing spot nightmare being the Bears at 9, right? Now all of a sudden that looks really crowded.
Rome Odunze in the JSN role. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still probably taking him in the 5th round, but it's gonna be tough to say that he should have been going up where Harrison or Nabers is. I mean, maybe you're saying they should be going lower, but I think Odunze is definitely the worst of those 3 prospects. I think the NFL agrees that he is not the one, and then he's the one that has the potential to land a landing spot where we're like legitimately concerned about his target volume. Certainly you could have Marvin Harrison go to the Patriots, you could have Malik Nabers go to the Giants, and you've got all sorts of questions about quarterback play, but there's no concerns really with any of the realistic landing spots with targets. Those guys are getting targets. They're kind of instant wide receiver 1s on their own teams. Odunze likely is like he could go to the Giants. I'm not going to be super worried about that. I think he gets a ton of targets. I think he's good. But to me, I mean, if you want to, you might have had me if you'd said Nabers instead of Odunze, because I think some teams do have Nabers ahead of Marvin Harrison. Nabers just had this awesome pro day. He's got size, he's got speed, he crushed the jumps. He's super productive, early declare. He checks like almost all the boxes and is an incredible prospect. And it's just that Marvin Harrison is just like a little better of a just a little. Yeah. And I think, if you want to say we should be prioritizing Malik Nabers right now because, Marvin Harrison is the most expensive prospect that we've ever had in best ball, and you can get Nabers at pick 32 instead of, literally like double his ADP, the exact same amount of picks go off before Marvin Harrison to after Marvin Harrison before you take Nabers. That's pretty sweet. So I'm in. Like I've been ahead of ADP on Nabers the whole way, and I'm ahead of ADP on all 3 of these guys, but the most on Nabers, very slightly on Harrison, very slightly on Odunze. Nabers is profiling as like a clear target for me, where I think like, man, like this dude could go to the Chargers. He could. Yeah. Like there's situations where we're super excited about Nabers' landing spot. I am not like I don't care I'm not feeling like, oh my God, it's a disaster if he goes to the Giants. Like there's a ton of targets available on the Giants, a ton. So, and he can be used in a number of ways, and he's got a smart offensive coordinator. So it's not what I'm hoping for, but I don't see the disaster scenarios for him either.
Yeah, that's fair. And the landing spot point is a good one. If you look at picks like 4 through 12 in the NFL draft, there's kind of like 2 smash landing spots for wide receivers. It's the Cardinals and Chargers, right?
Yeah.
And you've sold me that the odds of Nabers or Harrison going to those smash spots is significantly higher than Odunze going to one of them. Maybe you could talk me into there's some outside chance of Odunze to the Chargers at 5, but that's probably pretty thin. So Yeah, I
It is
think that.
possible, but I don't think
Yeah,
it happens. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, that makes sense to me. I think. Yeah, I'm coming around to your side of it more. I do think, yeah, the Falcons at 8, that is also pretty interesting. I think you put Odunze there, and just with the pass volume, and I don't know, I don't think that much of Darnell Mooney. That one is interesting to me. But yeah, there's kind of
But
some
that's not as
landmines.
clean, like
No, that's not as
Chargers
clean.
versus
Yeah, yeah,
Cardinals versus, like we could literally have Cardinals, Harrison, Chargers, Neighbors,
yeah, yeah.
Falcons, Odunze. Like, I mean, not that it's bad, but I get it. Yeah, I get the difference in price. Plus, I do think that he's not as good a prospect as those guys.
Yeah, that's fair. Here's another one. Xavier Worthy and Keon Coleman have like identical draft capital projections, and Xavier Worthy goes like 40, 30 picks higher. That one I struggle with a little bit. And again, like I think as a fantasy community, we see the 40 time. We think that matters more than it does. And a fast 40 time is sick. It's awesome. But there have been studies that show it like 40 time kind of gets double counted. And some of these guys that get drafted really high because they're really fast end up not panning out in the NFL. Worthy has a much better like prospect production profile than some of those other guys like Darius Hayward Bay, those types. So I'm not saying Worthy is like this bust, right? But man, Keon Coleman, I know he didn't have a fast 40, but he came out of the combine with like a 9.5 RAS. He's still consensus like late first, early second pick. And I think here, I'm more confident in this that as a fantasy community, we're jumping the shark if we think a 165-pound player, is 40 picks, 30 picks better in ADP than Keon Coleman. I don't get that one personally.
Yeah, what I would say with the 40 stuff is that it does get double counted, and we want to avoid that. But it also gets single counted by the NFL when they draft these guys, and we don't have the draft capital yet. And I'm more confident that Xavier Worthy, I'm more confident in his odds of going in the first round than Keon Coleman's. After you've got the guy who ran the fastest 40 ever versus a dude who was a bit disappointed. Not like, he jumped well and everything. He's still athletic, but 4'6", 140, right? And he's a guy who wins with athleticism. That's like the knock on him, is that he's sort of too dependent on the athleticism, very unrefined in his routes. Potentially you got to figure out ways to get him the ball, doesn't separate. Like, these are all the concerns. Then if that guy is not as athletic as was sort of widely assumed, even though he is athletic, but he's not like amazing, that could hurt his draft capital because it kind of undermines like the case of who he is. So I could be wrong about that. I mean, he could go ahead of Worthy, but I think the market is sort of single counting this, right? Maybe they are double counting it, but we do want to include the 40 time before the draft capital comes in, because we know the NFL is going to factor it into their draft capital.
Yeah, I guess that's fair, but it's just like, I get the logic behind it, but it's now been, 3 weeks since the combine? Is that too much? And like, we're not seeing, like, if you go to mock drafts, I forget which one I was looking at recently, maybe Daniel Jeremiah's, or
Coleman
you look
still
at,
goes late first in some. You're right.
yeah, he still goes late, and Worthy routinely doesn't go in the first in them still. So I guess I just have a hard time saying that like us as a fantasy community are able to like predict it better than like
Right.
these industry guys. So that's where I get lost in the 30 pick gap in ADP. And again, like the size, like I get the excitement with Worthy, but it's still, man, like 165 pounds. We've seen it with, we saw it with Tank Dell last year, right? Like it's not unprecedented, but yeah, I just think there's arguments to both sides of why a team like take the Bills, for instance. The Bills are not taking Xavier Worthy in the first round with the wide receiver room they have. I mean, at least I would be pretty shocked about how he fits in with the rest of those small guys. I don't
know. Because I think yeah, you're right. I mean, it's tough because Worthy didn't really, he was used more on like underneath stuff this past year, and he didn't crush as like a pure kind of deep threat burner.
Yeah.
Eric Froton had some pretty good stats on that on an episode of this pod a couple weeks ago, but just like hell, he was not catching his deep targets very well. So I agree. He's not kind of the most natural fit there. I will say on Keon Coleman, I've not really been into him as a prospect the whole way. I am now taking him. And so from that kind of the what does that say kind of perspective, similar with Josh Jacobs, where I'm like, oh, Josh Jacobs in the fourth, this feels fine. That's like, he's probably actually a smash because you're kind of into it. Right. So Keon Coleman, when I'm like I'm like, man, I could really use some more wide receiver upside in this build. And then Keon Coleman sitting there. And I feel like let me pull it up because I swear he'll fall and I'll be looking at like.
Yeah, he's been falling like steadily since the combine. Again, like people, I get the 4.6 140, but look at the rest of his combine. Like we have this thing called relative athletic score, and he's still like 96th percentile athlete. Like people are galaxy braining this combine thing with him, I think.
Yeah, he'll fall like Roman Wilson goes, and it's like Coleman and Leggett or something, or and I'm like, well, shit. I mean, I'm gonna take Coleman over Leggett, and I actually take a fair amount of Leggett because he's kind of just a cheap bet on athleticism and draft capital. Where's he on here?
He's like right on the line.
Right on the line. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So but I mean, I think Coleman goes ahead of Leggett in the draft, and I like Roman Wilson, but I'll take Coleman over Roman Wilson too. So I've been kind of pleased to get some more Keon Coleman. I just checked. I'm at like 13% on Keon Coleman. Yeah.
Okay. And so we agree more than we disagree here.
We do. I guess my thing is like this should change. This should not change, so I can just keep comfortably drafting him.
All right. We can block out the last 10 minutes of this episode. One more situation that I'll try to sell you on. I don't get this at all. Like Jalen McMillan is now like consensus, like mid-third round pick, and he's going behind Javon Baker, which is I think is okay. Javon Baker's like kind of consensus round 3, round 4 border. Jalen McMillan's going behind Malik Washington, who's like a consensus like 5th round pick. Like I don't get what we're doing there at all. McMillan really stood out to me as a guy who, if there's anyone on this list where like the draft capital projection doesn't line up with his ADP, McMillan seems like the most obvious buy to me.
Yeah, I'm 32% Jalen McMillan.
Okay.
I'm no, sorry, I'm at 20. I can't read. I'm at 20% Jalen McMillan, but that's still pretty good. The Jalen McMillan I'm not like as excited about him in terms of like a player archetype as I am as some of the other guys. Like I like Jermaine Burton a lot, which he looks like he's actually slightly overvalued by this. But
not really. Like I take a bunch of him too. This chart isn't perfect, so sorry to interrupt, but I like it.
No, you're good. Burton is more of like the type of archetype where I'm like, all right, this dude is a deep threat. He's pretty fast. He probably fits in with a bunch of different types of offenses. Without he can hit without like needing to run like a ton of routes. It gets on the field at the end of the season and immediately can be a spike week guy because he was a deep threat in college. He's got 4.45 speed. He jumped really well, 9.08 RAS because he had a 38.5-inch vertical, 11 1-inch broad jump, which is really good. So Burton's like kind of the guy I get more excited about, but in this kind of range. But McMillan, I take pretty often, 20%, as I said. He's more of a slot guy, not like the most exciting type of player. But I think it was Dane Brugler was talking him up as like, he was injured, and so people are kind of forgetting about him. But like the NFL doesn't tend to forget about those types of guys. The NFL tends to be very much on those kind of guys. It's us in the community and like the larger draft community that can kind of forget about a dude who didn't play. Like they've been scouting these guys. We're playing catch up. They're not playing catch up, right? We're playing catch up. And who do we miss? We miss the guy who was injured in his final season and wasn't really on the college football radar for us. And we're kind of like, looking at stats and his final season was kind of whatever, that's who we're going to be like lower on than the NFL. The NFL seems the whole way to have considered him a day 2 guy. So I do like him.
Cool. That's good because I'm taking a bunch of him too. Cool. Well, that's all I had. I thought maybe we'd have a really short show and could blame Davis for
Davis is not the problem, it turns out.
Yeah, I guess Davis isn't the problem. That hypothesis can be thrown out. But yeah, that was fun. I'll hand hosting duties back.
Do you have anything coming up to tell the people about?
Yeah,
I know you did some really good stuff in the contract situations and cut candidates over at ETR.
Yeah, I got that up on ETR. It's a little stale at this point, but still has some good stuff in there, particularly the pup candidates stuff. I'd recommend checking out, as we'll probably start to get more information on some of these injuries, but good just sort of overview of injury timelines. I'm going to be working on some articles before the draft, kind of around like what situations would benefit most from the status quo, if that makes sense. So take Rico Dowdle, for example. If the Cowboys don't draft a running back, he shoots up to what, pick 80, 90, I don't know, something like that, right? So that's the idea behind the article. I'm going to look at like who wins when the status quo prevails as a way to maybe identify which guys are going to jump a ton in ADP, or at least have the potential to jump a ton in ADP after the draft, as well as sort of highlighting situations that might be exciting for rookies if they land there, sort of wide open depth charts at, mostly running back and wide receiver. So
that's cool.
That's what
I've been trying to figure out like which situations are the most fragile, like, because if we get through like down, it's like Alec Pierce seems like sort of sneaky dangerous because he could straight up lose his job, kind of stuff. Like what depth charts are kind of more fragile, but I like that a lot. I was going to mention, you mentioned injury stuff and pup candidates and stuff. On Monday, doing an episode of the pod with Matthew Betts at the Fantasy PT, going to be talking through some injury stuff. So nice. was talking Nick Chubb with Herzig and everything. So we're actually going to bring a guy who knows how knees work on the pod. That's how we're going to do it.
Nice. That'll be interesting because now Chubb's like getting close to the point where I'm like, maybe like if he falls another 2 rounds, like maybe I'm back in. I don't know, but that'll be interesting.
Yep. All right. Thanks everyone for listening. I appreciate it. We'll see you back Monday. Talk to you then.